So obviously there's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about Ireland and politics and wars and stuff. And I want to just tell you that, like, if you're paying attention to this stuff, like, you're going to be broke and unsuccessful. I mean no disrespect to the victims of, satanic, murderous PDF files. And I don't mean any disrespect to people at war or countries at war. But guys, you've got to understand a very important quote. Give them bread and games and they will never revolt. Now, I'm not here to be some conspiracy theorist and talk about revolution, but what I am here to talk about is the idea that none of this is in your control. None of it. None of it. Look, when those files released and when all this news happened recently, I started looking at it on Twitter. I re-downloaded Twitter to start looking at it. I started watching YouTube videos on it. I started reading the news on it. Behaviors that I've never partaken in before. Because the thing with these dramas and with these issues in the world is they're very, very engaging. You got to watch them. And what happens if you're not careful is these things like politics, like the news, like, conflicts and stuff that you see online, they take up a massive portion of your mental space and there's nothing you can do about them. And so what ends up happening is your brain starts obsessing over figuring out what's going on here, and it starts trying to figure out like all these things. And your brain's an optimization machine, which means that whatever you feed it, it will try and make sense of. If you're trying to run a business or you're trying to build a career or become successful in your life, you need to feed your brain information that enables you to do that, because your life is the product of the information you consume. And if you don't believe me, like, literally go and look at anyone's life. Like, you can only take actions or make behavioral decisions based on information available to you in your conscious or unconscious mind. And the only way for your brain to know something is for you to receive information from your environment. And so the reason that a lot of people are unsuccessful is because they spend all their time obsessing over the news, obsessing over social media and all these things, and they don't really get any work done. And so you've got to imagine that your brain is like, it's like you've got so much mental bandwidth or real estate. And these dramatic things that happen consume part of your brain. And I can tell you from experience, if you want to become a millionaire or you want to do something idiosyncratic with your life, like become majorly successful, you need to dedicate every single neuron in your brain to the task at hand, which is building the business or building the career. And what I see time and time again with people is they get dragged into these rabbit holes, these conspiracy theories, which A, you can never really figure out or prove, and B, you're never going to understand the full picture. C, you're being taken for some ride because there's a reason why all of this stuff comes out when it does. There's a reason why the algorithms spike when they do. It's all controlled. But here's the thing, the kicker is it's not in your control. There's nothing you can do. And one of my favorite quotes from Epictetus, a Stoic, said, "If it's not in my control, it's none of my concern." The thing about this is a lot of people are very afraid. A lot of people are very frightened. They live in their country and the fabric of society, it feels as though it's being eroded away. Do you know what I mean? Like you suddenly start feeling a little less safe out on the street, or you suddenly start trusting the police a little bit less, or suddenly you don't believe anything the news says anymore, or suddenly you don't know what's real and what's not. Like your perception of reality is starting to sort of degrade, and your trust in authority figures and in platforms of authority is starting to be sort of degraded. And this is because of your consumption, but also you have every right to not have those trust in those things because they usually lie. But here's the thing. My philosophy for politics is to stay as far away from it as you can and focus on your business. Because let me tell you something. The only thing that is in your control is how much money you have and how much money you make. That is directly in your control. You can build a company, you can build skills, you can become smart, you can work really hard, you can be disciplined and build a company that adds value and make money. You can't control what's happening on random islands near Barbados. You can't control whether or not America and Russia go to war. You can't control what chips China manufactures. You can't control immigration. None of this is in your control. What you can control is your behavior and your discipline. And you can build your life up and build your financial situation up to a point where you have autonomy over the world. And what this basically means is my situation right now, for example, if everything went to crap, like if we had a massive World War III or a new disease outbreak, I could move anywhere I wanted to in a moment's notice with a private jet and a full suite of anything that I needed now, because I've built my wealth and because I have control over my life. You have nothing to worry about when you're rich. Let me make that very clear. You have nothing to worry about when you're rich. I'll give you an example. Andrew Carnegie was enlisted to fight in the Civil War in the America's Revolutionary War. You know, whenever that was in the 1800s. I don't know. My history's not that great. Anyway, Andrew Carnegie was enlisted to fight in the war. like mandatorily engaged to fight in the war. He was the founder of like the Carnegie Steel Network and stuff. He, alongside John D. Rockefeller, alongside Vanderbilt, alongside all these other successful men, paid another man to go to war for them. I don't think you understand how much control and power money gives you. There is nothing that anyone can inflict on you from a socio-macroeconomic standpoint or a cultural standpoint if you are rich. And this isn't some red pill Andrew Tate-esque conversation to have of like, they're all coming for you and you've got to defend you. That's not my point here. My point is that it is in your control. And instead of having an opinion on politics, you need to have an opinion on discipline and on work and on the niche that you've selected and on the business that you're building, because it doesn't, like, your opinion doesn't matter. Like, yes, we have a democracy, and yes, you can vote, and yes, you can change things in your own little way with your little protests and stuff. But let me tell you something about my opinion of politics. I've spent the last 10 years of my life building a fortune. I've made $40 million online. And by the way, if you want to learn how to do that as well, there is a solution here. It's Imperium Academy. There's a link in the description. You can click. It's a free course I built, but whatever. We'll tell you about that in a second. The only thing you control is how much money you make. Like, it is in your control. And so if tomorrow World War III broke out, or there was a massive outbreak, or if the government systems broke down, I would just fly to the safest country I could find. I don't care if it's Switzerland. I don't care if it's Singapore. I don't care if it's Antarctica. If you've got money, you're always going to be fine. Now, the cool thing about having money is you can buy passports, you can buy access, you have something everyone wants. You can charter private jets, you can charter helicopters, you can stock up. Like, you have the resource that everyone wants. Now, if there was a massive apocalypse, then obviously that would be a slight problem, right? But even then, you can get to the point where you can buy bunkers. And this is the thing is, I'm not a doomsday prepper. Like, I don't have 100 tins of tomato soup in my flat in case everything goes to shit tomorrow. The point that I'm making here is stop scrolling through drama, because what happens when you do that is like, I noticed this, like, your brain obsesses over it. Like, I was looking at the files, like looking them up and researching them. I was watching content on them. I was watching YouTube breakdowns and reading Twitter threads. And what started to happen is I noticed this thing that I've never felt before in the last 10 years, genuine fear. I started to feel disturbed and anxious. And it messed with my sleep, and it messed with my head, and I couldn't really focus at work. And I kind of realized, I was like, what am I doing? Like, none of this is in my control. All I'm doing is consistently stimulating my amygdala and my nervous system to generate a fear response. And your brain loves doing this. Your neurochemistry is addicted to doing this because it likes to know what's safe and what isn't. And when it finds something that isn't safe, it wants to be as close to it as possible from an exposure standpoint, so that it knows to stay away from it, if that makes sense, because it's a sort of inverted fear. But I noticed, like, my business started to suffer over the course of last week. Like, I've still been working incredibly hard. I've been putting in ridiculous hours. But like, in the evenings, instead of like thinking about work, I would think about these bloody files. And again, no disrespect to the victims and all this stuff, but it's not in my control, so it's none of my concern. And a lot of people use the cope of saying, oh, but you need to be educated and you need to be conscious and you need to, why? Why does me being educated on these conflicts and all these bad things happen? Why is that good for the world? It doesn't change my behavior. Well, obviously it might prevent me from doing terrible things, which I'm never going to do anyway. But you've got to start critically thinking about why you're watching these things. And when you learn to remove yourself from the news, from the feeds, and from the drama, and remove yourself from that, you're going to find so much mental peace and clarity where you can focus on things that are in your control, which is your wealth, your network, and your success. And if you build that for long enough and remove these distractions for long enough, when something massive comes along that drags you in, you'll become very cognizant of the fact you're being dragged in. Like, right now, people are mindless zombies. Most people are consuming all this content just mindlessly. And it generates so much fear. Like, I had this conversation with a guy the other day who's like, he's in the UK. He's like, yeah, I wish we could buy guns in the UK now. And I was like, why? He's like, well, because, when everything falls apart and the social situation like completely crumbles before us, I'm like, dude, you're not seeing things objectively. You've been polarized by your algorithm. And that's not to say that there aren't real socioeconomic, cultural issues in the current climate of geopolitics. Like, there definitely are issues that we're facing that you might want to have some level of understanding of how they work. But this obsessive thing where you're just like, you're like wired into the machine, man, it's not healthy. You've got to unplug yourself. Because the truth is that it takes too much mental bandwidth. Like, imagine you've got 100 acres of mental real estate to work with every day. And that's all you've got. And for me, like my business takes up all 100 acres. There might be an acre dedicated to my health, a couple of acres dedicated to my family, a few acres dedicated to my relationships. But the rest of it is just work. But when you start letting in these toxic little poisonous trends, these conflicts, you know, suddenly before you know it, 30 or 40 of your acres are taken up by conspiracy theories and drama and politics and all this stuff. And it's just like the only news that I've watched in the last year was the release of the UK budget to see what would happen to my dividend tax and corporation tax rates. Sometimes things are relevant, but as soon I watched it for 30 minutes, I got the breakdown, I turned it off and I got out. And that was it. You need to learn to have this discipline with dramatic things. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself spending time on them, focusing on them, and it's going to consume your brain. And not to mention as well, like, stop having an opinion. You're not educated. It's like with Brexit. Like with Brexit, you know, when the UK left the EU, everyone had an opinion on whether or not we should stay in the EU or leave the EU. No one knew. Like, no one's smart enough to understand the macroeconomic, long-term cultural impacts of the fragmentation of the European Union. Like, there are PhD students that study economics that don't even know what's going to happen. But for some reason, Bill down the pub thinks we should leave and Sarah up the road thinks we should stay because of what they saw on the news. Like, it just turns people into, you just become an idiot. And you just become this stupid person when really what you need to do is focus on your mission, focus on yourself, build enough wealth so that when everything goes to shit, if it does, you have the power and the autonomy to exercise control over your immediate environment to protect your family and your friends and the people that you love. Because you worked and focused whilst everybody else was blindly scrolling through a screen, just terrified of what's going to happen. Be the person that leads. Focus and do that. If you want help building a business, and you want to become successful and you don't know how to start and that's one of your problems, there's a link in the description you can click. It's called Imperium Academy. It's a free course. There's no credit card required. It took me a year to build. We've got 50,000 people in there right now, all getting results, getting their first clients. Check it out if you want. But I want to just rant about this because it happened to me and I was like, shit, if it happened to me, like other people must be in some real trouble. So yeah.